Let's talk about healing the emotionally unavailable man. Now, before I get into this one, I do want to make you guys aware that I have created a series on confessions of the emotionally unavailable man, and I recently did a video on fixing the emotionally unavailable man. Now, the reason I felt the desire to do this specific one on healing is to show you what that journey actually looks like and has looked like, right? And I believe the end goal of every single one of our journeys is to get back to a place of wholeness. I believe that all healing serves one purpose. If we're to talk about healing in like the most physical sense, right? Let's say you have some type of wound. We want that wound to heal in order for it to get back to a place of normalcy. We want it to get back to its original state. And so all healing is getting back to the original. So when it comes to the emotionally unavailable man, which is something I would have classified myself as for, a majority of my young adulthood, upwards until maybe the age of like 26, 27, when I truly started to wake up to who and what I truly was and the way in which I was moving through life. But up until that point, I was essentially living life from a blueprint of drama, a blueprint of chaos, a blueprint of unresolved emotional turmoil in essence. And when I say drama, I'm not talking about like, we're thinking, Fight Club or something like that, or, Real Housewives or such and such. I'm not talking about that drama necessarily, but an internal drama, which is an internal conflict. In essence, there was unresolved trauma that was taking place within myself that I was not acknowledging. There was emotional turmoil that I was not willing to face. I was not willing to acknowledge because I believed it was far too painful to face that. Now, you may be dealing with somebody who is emotionally unavailable and you think to yourself, this person just doesn't care. That's what this is about. They are, the narcissist. They are some type of personality disorder, which essentially separates them from the emotion. The reality is, at least for a majority of us as men who are in a state of emotional numbness, is that we are not void of emotions. Instead, we have chosen to shut that aspect of ourselves down consciously and unconsciously. We have repressed that aspect and we continuously suppress that aspect of ourselves as a means for survival, as a means for protecting ourselves. Now, that may sound ridiculous. You think to yourself, why would somebody, view suppression as a means to survival? Well, you see, when you're raised in any environment that gives you some sort of messaging that your emotions are wrong, right? Or that emotion is weakness. Like a lot of us, our programming is that your emotional state is something to be eradicated and to be erased. I remember being a little kid and, my pops has matured out of this at this point, but I remember going to the barbershop at maybe 3 years old and, like any other child, I started crying because the clippers are buzzing in your ear. They're hot. It's uncomfortable. It's not natural, right? This first time I'm getting a haircut. And so I cry and my pops is just looking at me like embarrassed by me, right? Takes me home and, I get lashes for that. I get lashes. I'm going to say it straight up. This is all confessional. And, in hindsight, I realized it's because he was projecting his own embarrassment. He was projecting his own childhood onto me. And so he was afraid that if I moved through life, expressing my emotions in that way, God forbid, then that would be leaving me to vulnerability. It would essentially make me susceptible to be taken advantage of. It would make me weak. And that's where most of the well-intended child rearing is coming from. You don't want a boy who's going to be quote unquote weak. And I do understand that there is a level of taking emotionalism so far to where, when you have no actual control over your emotions, that's a very different thing than being in tune with your emotional state, because all of us as humans are inherently emotion based, right? Emotion simply means energy in motion. There was a consistent influx of energy that is flowing through us. And when we do not allow ourselves to feel, we are living in an unnatural state, which is why you find the emotionally unavailable man so repressed, and he can oftentimes be so angry, and he can, he can all of a sudden pop off or feel like he's completely withdrawn. For me, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, in this Aquarian airish nature of mine, I was withdrawn, right? I was cool, quote unquote. Man, like you just nothing, nothing bothers you, nothing, you don't care about nothing. Those are the type of things I would hear because I was an arm's distance. It was simple as that. And for me, that was the safest thing that I could do. I feared a lot of that conflict because I didn't know what to do with emotions. I grew up in a very emotionally void home. Even my own family system, the culture I grew up in. I grew up in Zimbabwe. So it's like in an African culture, in an African, family setting with a mother who was very emotionally withdrawn herself, which again is confusing to a child because this is supposed to be kind of your emotional connector. When the emotions are void everywhere around you, and the messaging is your emotions make you weak and they make you vulnerable, they make you susceptible. When you're now getting into a stage of relationship dynamics, intimate relationships and pair bonding, you find yourself in a headspace and an emotional space where you are now trying to hide that aspect as deeply as possible, because if it was weakness in my childhood, what's it going to be now that I'm, looking to connect to somebody? I want your validation. Like, that's what many emotionally available men would not tell you. We want your approval. We want your validation, probably more than anything else. If you look at the red pill space, etc., don't be fooled. Just because they got all types of rhetoric going on in that space, because I was very heavily in that space. Just because all of that's the conversation, what's really underlying is pain that we're trying to evade and numb and escape, right? And there's a narrative of, how do I show up in the world in order to get your attention? That's what that's about. I want women to see me. And again, that's not a healthy thing. It's not healthy on either side. Y'all been told that your worth comes from, having a man. And I'm an advocate of healthy relationship dynamics. I want all of us to be in healthy relationship dynamics because I believe that's at the core of a healthy system. But in order for there to be healthy relationships, there must be healthy people stepping into those relationships. And the only way that happens is we deal with our unresolved BS, right? We got to deal with our stuff. We got to deal with the stories. We got to deal with the identification, with the feelings of worthlessness. We truly have to dive deep into those weeds, and we have to uproot those weeds, and we have to do so intentionally, because it's not going to happen just by itself. When you're living in a state of unconsciousness, it's just going to continue perpetuating the very same cycle. It's going to be this default that you have here, which is the life that you've been living so far, the life the other individual's been living. So again, getting back to the thing of healing is to say, what is actually being healed is the fact that we feel that we're not deserving of love. And so we're afraid of the loss of love. It's like, that's where jealousy comes from. That's where all these sorts of temperaments and mentalities come from. I believe that if I show up in a certain way, I'm going to be taken advantage of, that I'm going to be abandoned, in the same way that I was in my household. Maybe mama didn't leave, but she left emotionally. Maybe, pops didn't leave. Well, unfortunately, in the day and age we live, that might actually, it's like at least 50% of the odds is that was the case, right? But even if they were in the house, they were emotionally void, or, the suppression of emotion was at the forefront. And so as children, we are raised in an unnatural, toxic environment that leads us to become the very same thing. And now we reach a place where we are responsible for our own healing, right? But yet we don't even know. Like for me, I didn't know what I didn't know. Up until the day, I remember the day when I had my epiphany. I was sitting in my apartment, in somewhere in Northern California. That's all I'm gonna say for right now. And I was looking at a whiteboard where I'd written all these goals and aspirations I have for myself. And I looked at it and I was like, why haven't I done any of these things? Like, why have these things just been left to the wayside? And all of a sudden, it's like I allowed a moment of consciousness to seep in. And I started seeing that it's because you fear commitment. You feared commitment in every area of your life. And that got deeper and deeper. And I started seeing myself in my past relationships. And I started crying right there. It had been a long time that I just cried to cry. You know what I mean? But I cried, and I let myself cry. And I could just feel the weight of fearing commitment, fearing connection, fearing intimacy. I saw like scenes running through my head of every single time that fear had led to the very opposite thing I wanted. I wanted love. I wanted to be in a relationship and felt connected, but I would run from it, and I would create an arm's distance. I would create disconnection. I would create stories in my head about what the other person's true intention was. As opposed to, oh, this is actually them trying to love on me. It was always, it's manipulation. They don't really appreciate me. They're just using me. They're wanting something from me, etc. And, confirmation bias. I would look for people who matched that narrative so I could affirm my belief system. I could affirm the feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. And so again, this is what we're dealing with here is so much deeper than most people can even explain from their own standpoint. And I don't know what anybody else is saying on the subject. I'll be honest with you. I'm not I don't watch content like that. So I'm not sure what the narrative is, but most narratives that I've heard in the past of relationship coaches, etc., is oh, you're just dealing with a toxic individual who's just problematic, and they don't care. And we put simple fixes, simple labels on it to try to simplify for ourselves. And sometimes we villainize people so it makes it easier for us to leave a relationship instead of just saying this person is not a match for me. It's in this society, we don't make it okay to just say, why did you leave? Because it wasn't for me. We have to make it a huge drama and fiasco, which also leads us to taking things to the furthest extent. It's got to be a real serious problem until we actually leave, until we actually, take a step out of that situation. And that's the part that most of us fear, especially when you're still getting something from that dynamic. For some of us, we may be in a place where we're still feeding off of that. Because once I realized I was emotionally unavailable, emotionally distant, I'd gotten myself in a relationship where both of us were emotionally distant, right? In the past, it had been, I'm now in a relationship with somebody who is, has a deep, clingy persona. Everything about them was just, needing more and more of me. And I was trying to run away from that situation. But I ended up in a situation because there was some healing taking place. There were things I was acknowledging about myself, my savior complex, my people-pleasing persona, and things of that nature. But I ended up in almost the perfect storm in a relationship where both of us were emotionally distant. It looked just like my household, right? And it felt just like my household. I even called it peace at one point because it just felt so familiar. I was like, ooh, this is it. And in that relationship dynamic was the greatest teacher I ever had. And I'm so thankful for you, for everything that ever happened in that relationship. It would have seemed like a crazy roller coaster most. Not from, your typical standpoint. Again, not this dramatic fiasco, yelling matches, but because it was so much distance and it became so much more obvious, the more I was becoming in tune with myself, the more I was realizing, my own deepest sensitivities, my own deepest fears, those wounds that had been left untended to. Once I started tending to them, the distance became further and further. And you might be in that place where you're now, on your own healing journey. And so it becomes more obvious that what you're in is an unhealthy dynamic. And, it's a normal thing to want to save the other person. It's a normal thing to want to go out of your way and then do something in order for that person to realize, their value and their worth, or to realize that they're loved, or, to make space for them. And those are wonderful things, and they come from a genuinely good place. But when you feel the need, the insatiable need to change somebody and to heal them, to be their healer, that's coming from fear. It's coming from the ego. Because in truth, you can change no one. You can't change nobody but your baby in diapers. And even that one's quite a task most of the time. You can't change anybody. It's not your job. It never was. It wasn't assigned to you. God didn't bring you on this planet. Creator Source didn't bring you on this planet in order for you to change anybody besides yourself, in order to shift the level of consciousness of anybody besides yourself, and then live as an example. You have to live in a way that's in accordance in order to have the impact on the ones around you. And sometimes it's not going to be the one that you want, right? I wished that, my mama, my daddy, my this one, but I wished everybody would just, wake up to what's truly going on, and they could start taking care of themselves, and they could build healthy dynamics within and then without. But that wasn't the case. Instead, it's complete quote unquote strangers that are having the greatest impact in their lives by my message. And I've now come to accept that as that is what it is. Everybody has their own path and their own journey, because healing is a choice. It's a natural aspect. Our physical body is always looking to get back to healing, and we get in the way of it. It's the same thing emotionally. Emotionally, we're always looking to heal those limiting belief systems, or those flawed and warped perceptions of ourselves, and the inadequacy, unworthiness, undeservedness. All of that is always trying to come to surface, to show itself, and to say, hey, this needs investigation, this needs your attention. And more times than not, we're suppressing it. More times than not, we're pushing that very same thing down, and we are stopping ourselves from healing. And you can't stop somebody from stopping themselves. If somebody wants to be in a ditch, they will find their way in a ditch, and you will spend the rest of your life trying to pull them out of that ditch. I promise you that. It will be a nonstop, cyclical, 24-hour process of you trying to pull people out of ditches that they're putting themselves in. And you will find yourself frustrated, aggravated, and feeling some type of way. You will then start to make yourself, a victim to the situation, when in truth, you're choosing to be a part of your own suffering. So again, when it comes to the healing process of the emotionally unavailable, I had to come to my own sense of self. I had to realize that this was creating such a rift between me and me, that I was disconnected from my own essence, my own spirit. And if I wanted to have this, because I've always been a dude who knew I wanted a family, right? Even though there was, moments where I was, a little bit for the streets or whatever it may be, there was a deeper aspect of me who knew that I wanted this stable, this not just stable, but this foundational family unit. I wanted to have that family, and I knew that was something that mattered to me. And I thought I was even building towards that in many cases. But, my pops told me way back one time, at the end of a breakup, he said, I told, we really want to have a family, and get married, etc. And he looked at me and said, marriage, he's like, you're not even in the stadium, let alone in the game. You're not even on the field. You know what I'm saying? You're not even on the bench. You haven't made it in the stadium. You're still in the parking lot when it comes to marriage. You ain't ready. And that was me at 22. And now I'm, 28, about to be 29. And I'm like, yeah, I was nowhere near ready, because that version of me was, again, he might have been talking about in the physical sense, right? But for me, emotionally, absolutely not. Like, imagine bringing children into this life experience. And that's something I really want us to start thinking about, is like, we are creating families. We're not just creating relationships, right? Between me and this other individual, unless you don't have any desire of children, then I completely get it. But we are cultivating families. Maybe you have kids already, whatever it is, and you're building a bigger family in essence. These families are going to define what our society and our culture becomes. I don't know how much you care about that, but I care deeply about this. This is like at the foundation of why I do what I do, especially at this point in my life, is to say we're responsible for the next generation's upbringing and the way in which they value themselves, the way in which they value life. And, we think to ourselves, why have we fallen into almost like a madness as a culture? It's because we have taken that toxicity and we perpetuated it within our families. We've made it normal for a baby mama culture instead of, marriage or at the very least, like connected parents. Intentionality when bringing children into the world, responsibility over our own bodies and things of that nature, where we respect ourselves enough to not just give ourselves away to any old body, not give our most valuable aspect, which is self, to anybody for the simple point of getting some sort of validation from, that man or that woman. Like, when we no longer are operating from that place, when we are no longer operating from that place of seeking external validation, we are free to experience our true value and worth. And that is the healing journey. That's how we get back to healing. And for the one who is emotionally unavailable, the only way they can get there is by getting there themselves. They have to want that. And if you find yourself in a relationship with a person genuinely is like desiring to get there and you want to be helpful in the situation, simply make space. That's all you can do for anybody in your life. You can make space, right? To say if they want to express themselves. And again, they're going to be like a baby taking their first steps. This is brand new territory for them. They don't know what they're doing in most cases. They're going to stumble and fall and be figuring things out. Make space for them. That's the most valuable thing for any relationship dynamic, is just to create space for conversation to be had. You may take some things personally, but it's not personal. But if you are taking it personally, you're going to probably close that individual off, in the same way that probably happened in their childhood. That's, a piece of game I gave, I think, on like episode 5 of the Confessions of the Emotionally Unavailable Man, is Like if they are showing up and they're finally trying to express themselves, and you know you're making it about you, you're gonna close them off, and it's just gonna be more of the very same thing. Not saying it's your responsibility to, but I'm saying you're the one who wants this, right? You're the one who's saying I want this. So if you're the one who's saying you want this, then you got to do what's in accordance with it. This is a completely different message. Probably make a whole video on this. Ooh, hello. But you know, so many people say that they want to be a husband or a wife. They want to be, you know, they want to be married, but most people are not willing to be a husband or to be a wife, right? They think that the ring is going to make it mean something. They think that, you know, having a baby makes you a parent or makes you a mother or a father. Nah, that just makes you, you know, as my homegirl Zena said, that just makes you a, what'd she say? She, not a home, I was about to say home. What'd she say? She said, that just makes you a caregiver. That's what it is. A caregiver, right? As a man, you don't want to be a sperm donor. You don't want to be that. Nope. You want to be a father. You don't want to be a person who had a child. You want to be a mother. So again, we don't just want to be in these relationships just to be in them. Like we truly want to be a partner, then we have to essentially show up in that way. In the very same way we would want reciprocated. Even if it's not being reciprocated, we're still going to be that person. You have to stand on what you stand on. And when you move through life in that way, in integrity, you will eventually get into a relationship dynamic. If it's not the one you're in right now, you're going to be in one you could not even fathom. You know, I didn't even know that, you know, on the other side of me choosing healing was my soulmate. I didn't know that, but it was no longer about that. It was about me learning how to value myself and accept myself and to become worthy of myself and to love myself. And I'll be honest with you, there's some folks out there, if their man today started to value and love himself in a very real way, they would not like it because that's not the script. It's not the familiar. You didn't sign up for that. So we may say one thing, but we want another. That's a whole nother subject right there. That's a whole nother one. I remember being on a coaching call and I asked one of my clients, like, if this man actually changed today completely, please be real honest with me. Would you be comfortable with that? And she paused for like maybe 3 minutes. And at the end of that break, she said, you know what? No, I'll be honest with you. It'll be kind of like weird, kind of uncomfortable. I say, yeah, that's the God honest truth. It would be an adjustment period. And sometimes it would turn the person all the way off. You know, I've heard women all the time say, oh, I want a man who has, you know, morals, integrity, character. And I say, do you know what that comes with? That means that same expectation is on the both of y'all. Now, there are many who they're saying what they're saying because it's truly what they desire, of course. But the one who is ready for that is different than the one who wants it, right? Every little kid wants to drive, or at least most kids want to drive. You're 7 years old. You're 12 years old. You're 14 years old. You're not ready yet. You may want it, but you're not ready yet. Once you meet the qualifications, now you're ready. Simple as that. So that's my little 2.5 cents on healing and our role within that healing process. As simple as if you're there, make space. And sometimes the space you got to make is all the way out. There's so much space that you're not even there. Sometimes that's the best space that you can make. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. Till the next time, I'm gonna sip me a little bit of this lukewarm water and head up out of here.
Myself, I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. But I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking a 3, 6, 5, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up, you know them constellations. Constantly gazing like house of praises, you get to praising. They see your light shine, that's why they so frustrated. Even the sofa in Nova Scotia will win the bagels. I couldn't get a